Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Tucker's getting an early start on the pumpkin pie and I'm the turkey he pardoned. One man is a deadly seductive cult leader. The other is Charles Manson. That's Newsweek's take on President Trump's similarities to the deceased killer Charles Manson. We'll discuss that in just a bit. But first, a wave of sexual misconduct allegations has turned into a tsunami, sweeping away all of Los Angeles County, Manhattan Island, and the District of Columbia. First, it was the Hollywood Titans, Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, Louis C.K. Then it was Senator Al Franken. Now, Charlie Rose has been fired by both CBS and PBS after multiple accusers came forward. And today, Rose's CBS This Morning co-hosts addressed his misconduct allegations.
Let me be very clear. There is no excuse for this alleged behavior. This will be investigated. This has to end. This behavior is wrong.
Both my son and my daughter called me. Oprah called me and said, "Are you okay?" I am not okay. After reading that article in the Post, it was deeply disturbing, troubling, and painful for me to read. What do you say when someone that you deeply care about has done something that is so horrible?
Meanwhile, in Washington, even Nancy Pelosi says Democrat Congressman John Conyers must face an ethics investigation for allegedly harassing numerous women on his staff. We'd be remiss, by the way, if we didn't revisit what our old friend Maxine Waters once had to say about Conyers.
You know, there is a member of Congress who has been supportive of women for many, many years. He is quiet, he is confident, he is powerful, but he has impeccable integrity on all of our issues. Give John Conyers a big round of applause.
Yeah. Give him a big hand and he'll put his big hand all over you. Across the country, it's one Democrat after another now. The chair of the Florida Democratic Party has resigned over misconduct. In New York, a woman says former Democrat Assemblyman Sam Hoyt sent her nude photos and threatened to have her fired if she resisted his advances. In her lawsuit, the woman says Governor Andrew Cuomo's administration ignored her complaints. And in California, the Disney animation head and longtime Democratic donor John Lasseter is taking a leave of absence after acknowledging his own, quote, missteps. It must come as a shock to those who still fancy Democrats the, quote, party of women. Roy Moore's starting to look kind of lonely as an accused person on the political right. And speaking of Roy Moore, President Trump weighed in for the first time today on the allegations against him.
I can tell you one thing for sure. We don't need a liberal person in there, a Democrat. He denies it. Look, he denies it. I mean, if you look at what is really going on and you look at all the things that have happened over the last 48 hours, he totally denies it. He says it didn't happen. And, you know, you have to listen to him also. You're talking about, he said 40 years ago this did not happen.
He totally denies it. Meanwhile, Charlie Rose has a 48-year broadcasting career vaporized in 24 hours. Penny Young-Nance is president of Concerned Women for America. She joins us. Penny, these are all liberal icons who are falling here, not just Charlie Rose, Kevin Spacey. That's like the coolest TV drama for liberals and progressives. Then you have Harvey Weinstein, the maker of all the upscale Oscar bait chick flicks. Is there a pattern one can discern here about supposedly the side of women and what they're actually like in private?
Well, you know, look, I feel a little bit like we flipped on the light and we're watching the cockroaches scatter. And as miserable as this is and as uncomfortable, it's important to happen. We have to expose this in order to get rid of the moral decay. And honestly, Mark, this isn't just a Democrat issue. It's a Republican and a Democrat issue. And we've got to be honest about that. The EEOC estimates that, I think this is a high number, that 1 in 4 women have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. Regardless of what the number is, it's horrific, and we have to be serious about it. And we've got to step forward and meet this head on and deal with it, because it's a heart issue. But I do have to say that I wonder 20 years ago if Patty Murray and Dianne Feinstein and Susan Collins had stepped forward and challenged Bill Clinton, if we would be further down the road.
Well,
because I think this process will work its way out. At the end of this, we will be better.
Well, to go back to what you were just saying there, in the 90s, we were explicitly told that character doesn't matter. The people said,
Right.
who cares if
It's
this
just
guy...
about sex,
who
right?
cares if this guy is a pig? It's just about sex. Everybody does it. What's changed then?
Well, I think that there's a reckoning, because we've ignored this, and because we've ignored the decay, it's been allowed to flourish. And it's a serious issue. As a mother of a 20-year-old, I think all of us have to recognize we want better for our children. We thought the days of Mad Men were over. Some of us knew better, but it's not, and it's real. And I want my $14 million taxes that were paid out for congressmen to get paid back. I'd like to see them explain to their wives what happened to the money in their paychecks when it's garnished back to the American people. We have to take this seriously.
That seems to be pure Mad Men, in fact, where it's recognized that that male members of Congress are entitled to let their wandering hands wander where they may, and then the taxpayers will pay for it. But let me ask you about the broader liberal scene. I mean, some of these guys seem to have figured out that actually being a liberal progressive is a great way to meet vulnerable chicks and hit on them. I mean, basically, Harvey Weinstein seems to use all those classy movies with Meryl Streep and Judi Dench as cover for hitting on the broads who come into his orbit. The same thing I think you can say about Charlie Rose at PBS. I mean, in a sense, are they factoring, is that part of the business model that's actually where you go to meet the kind of women you can prey on?
Well, I don't know why that they allowed Harvey Weinstein to be at the Women's March backstage with women that he had assaulted. I think that's absolutely outrageous. But we have to be honest that licentiousness cannot be ignored, whether it's in Hollywood, whether it's in journalism. And the next shoe to drop, mark my words, Mark, will be in the hollowed halls of academia.
Oh yeah, that's a whole world with all those college professors.
That is a ripe ground right there.
Penny, thanks for that. Nobody has been a bigger beneficiary of harassment hypocrisy than the Clinton dynasty. Last year, the message was that you were a sexist if you didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. There was a special place in hell for you. Now, in a belated act of remembering, people are recalling all the accusers that Clintons trashed to keep and to hold power.
Clinton needs to stop. She needs to stop talking about this topic unless Bill Clinton wants to come forward and apologize for being a sexual harasser, for settling with women.
Hillary Clinton hasn't been held accountable for her role. She refuses to answer questions of it, and I think that is the reason why she lost the 2016 election, because Donald Trump was able to throw that in her face, and she did not want to confront it.
Well, Richard Goodstein was a lawyer advising Hillary Clinton in 2008 and 2016. He joins us now. Richard, are you still aboard the Clinton train? There seem to be a lot of people jumping off after 20 years.
Mark, I'm just a little confused by your lead-in to the segment we just heard, where you said first there was Harvey Weinstein. You did forget the 16 accusers against Donald Trump, and then you said, and then there was Al Franken. That overlooked the 9 against Roy Moore, accusing, incidentally, of things much more than an unwanted kiss. Hands, fingers going places, in Donald Trump's case, that we couldn't even discuss on this network, right?
Hey, okay, Richard, let's if we want to do this, you can't tell the players without a scorecard. I agree with what Penny was saying. This is taxpayers' money that has gone to settle 200 cases in Congress, and I would like to see like to know the names, and then we'll have a final score, Democrats and Republicans. Do you support the revelation, the release of those names?
Absolutely. I think it is scandalous. I agree with what Penny said in many regards. She said it's not a Democratic or Republican problem. Couldn't agree more. I mean, the fact is, the litany of names, Bob Packwood and Mark Foley and Larry Craig, believe me, there are plenty of Republicans here. And there's no reason to recite them all, because we have to concede it's men doing bad things. Right. It has nothing to do with party.
Larry Craig played footsie in the Minneapolis airport men's room and didn't get any action for it. And Mark Foley, he had a non-sex scandal where he was writing B.A.-do to pages. That's very different from Bill Clinton. And Michelle Goldberg in the New York Times, she wrote a column, I Believe Juanita, published a couple of days ago, and she said, Bill Clinton no longer has a place in decent society. Do you agree with Michelle Goldberg?
You know, Ken Starr spent $70 million looking into Bill Clinton's transgressions, including talking to Kathleen Willey and Paula Jones and Juanita Broaddrick. And Juanita Broaddrick was found twice not to have testified truthfully, once under oath, once in a deposition. She denied having sexual contact. So, yes, I believe that. So
you don't find Juanita Broaddrick credible? You differ
I'm
from
saying when she was under oath, Mark, when she was under oath, it's one thing that trot her out to some press conference before a debate. When she was under oath and there were legal consequences for lying, for lying, she testified that she did not have sexual contact. So, yes, I believe that.
Look. Nobody's talking about lawsuits now. This is all past the statute of limitations in most of these cases, except for some of these recent fellas. But basically, Michelle Goldberg is writing in the New York Times that she believes a rapist was a two-term president of the United States.
And what I'm saying is, I don't know why Michelle Goldberg would believe somebody who, under oath, twice denied having sexual contact with Bill Clinton. You have to ask Michelle Goldberg why she does. So you can call Bill Clinton anything you want. We know what Donald Trump has bragged about.
Well, maybe she believes her, Richard, because your candidate, Hillary Clinton, told us that you should always believe women.
Until the evidence shows contrary, right? That's what Hillary Clinton said.
That bit. She didn't say anything about the evidence showing contrary.
Go back and check the records. That's precisely what she said when she was asked about this. Time and time again, she said, yes, going in, women should be believed until there's evidence showing to the contrary.
Why do Mika Brzezinski and Michelle Goldberg and these other people who have been loyal to the Clintons for 25 years now want the Clintons to go away?
Well, first of all, I don't think they do want the Clintons to go away. And the fact is, Michelle Goldberg, in her more recent column, said she thought she had actually overreacted to all this.
No, she thought she'd overreacted to Al Franken.
That's true.
That's the guy who grabbed a lady's butt at the state fair.
There are plenty of people, and maybe Michelle Goldberg and Mika are part of them, who want the Clinton legacy to be forgotten for all the accomplishments that they had, for whatever reasons. You'll have to ask them. But the fact is, Democrats, by and large, are proud of the legacy that Bill and Hillary Clinton have left. And again, I'm waiting for this network and others to look at all the women who came out against Donald Trump a year ago, and that was just kind of swept under the rug.
But wait a minute. We were told in the Clinton era that character doesn't matter, that if you do a great job on welfare reform and taxes, that the fact that you're a pig in your private life doesn't matter. Why isn't what's source for the Democrats source for the Republicans too?
Again, Ken Starr spent $70 million looking into this, Mark. I'm waiting for a buck to be spent to look into the 16 women who came out against Donald Trump. When that happens, you and I'll be on the same page.
Okay, so you're like putting a price tag on these investigations. No,
yes.
It's interesting to hear that. Thank you, Richard. I'm glad you dropped by tonight. This is a Fox News alert. A Democrat congressman is under investigation by the FBI for possibly paying off an opponent to stop him running against him. Fox News chief congressional correspondent Mike Emanuel has more. Mike.
Well, Mark, good evening. Pennsylvania Democrat congressman is in hot water with the feds, accused of a $90,000 payoff to try and stop a primary challenge in 2012. The congressman is Bob Brady of Pennsylvania, who spoke at last year's Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia. Two of his top political aides were charged with attempting to hide the payment to Brady's challenger in that race. The FBI special agent handling the case says the investigation has uncovered evidence which indicates Brady and his two political aides tried to conceal payments from the congressman's campaign to get challenger Jimmy Moore to drop out. All of this coming to light due to a search warrant affidavit related to the case. Brady and his aides have said the payment to Moore's campaign was legal, documented, and carried out mostly by lower-level figures. The congressman is not commenting at this point. His lawyers are trying to convince the Justice Department he hasn't done anything wrong, suggesting the search warrant is digging for documents they turned over months ago. The attorneys say Brady is not a target. Part of the claim from the Brady side is the money paid to Moore, the challenger, was to buy exclusive rights to polling information Moore gathered before dropping out of the race. Prosecutors say Brady had that information 6 months earlier, and prosecutors say the challenger dropped out after cutting a secret deal with the congressman.
Mike, thanks. We'll keep an eye on that. So far, that's the only evidence of interference in the electoral process from a Democrat congressman. It's been 48 years, but Newsweek just found the newest member of the Manson family. We'll tell you who it is up next. Charles Manson is dead, but Newsweek has found a sinister new cult leader to replace him, President Donald Trump. What's the reasoning? According to Newsweek, Trump and Manson both use, quote, emotional language to establish a bond with followers. You know how it is. One day you're giving a speech on immigration, and the next day everybody's writing helter-skelter on the wall in blood. It's a simple two-step process. Joe Concha writes about media for The Hill, and he joins us. Joe, were you shocked to discover that Trump and Manson are the only two guys in history to have used emotional language to connect with followers?
Well, the funny thing is, if you read the story, the author, or at least the psychoanalyst that they speak to, concedes that he has no idea what Manson actually said to attract his followers.
Right.
He just made assumptions that he knew and then made the connection back. And this is all about TDS, which is Trump Derangement Syndrome. And this example, and we have two others here, actually is from the last 2 days. It's not like we're doing the best of from the year type of thing. So there clearly is no antidote. But I guess they're thinking, you know, Mussolini, Stalin just doesn't have that oomph anymore as far as analogies. And Hitler, we've hit our 100,000 quota as far as comparing Trump to him. So let's go with somebody who was breathing within the last 72 hours that they could relate to in Charles Manson.
Yeah, and those guys are like wacky foreigners. Let's compare him to an all-American monster.
Boom, there you go.
But it isn't the reality, though, that Manson had huge influence on the left. I mean, it was Bernadine Dawn, who's the wife of Bill Ayers, Obama's mentor and patron, who said, dig it. First they killed these pigs, then they ate dinner in the same room with them, then they even shoved a fork into the pig Tate's stomach. Wild. I mean, he's a hero to the left. He's got nothing to do with Trump or the right.
I believe he wrote some songs while he was in prison, and then some musicians actually performed them for Manson. So, yeah, he became a cult legend after brutally having 7 people killed, including Sharon Tate, an actress.
Yeah, that's right. I think the BBC actually tracked down something like 75 bands who play Charles Manson songs. This other story you mentioned from The New Yorker is about, quote, the sinister banality of American life emanating from Donald J. Trump.
The exact quote is, the attack on Rand Paul by his neighbor reveals a sinister banality, as you said, of American life that these days is often emanating from Donald Trump. Now, if you read about this story, Rand Paul was attacked by a neighbor, and reportedly for non-political reasons.
Yeah, lawn clippings, supposedly, or something like that. Yeah,
right? And a sitting senator is attacked at his home and gets a couple of ribs broken. And again, it's the anger that's emanating from Donald Trump that actually possessed this person to do that.
It's not just anger, though. It's banal anger.
Right.
Yeah,
that's the trick. And here's the thing. When Steve Scalise was shot and all those Republican congressmen back in the spring, and then it was discovered that he was a Bernie Sanders supporter,
right.
That's unfair to Bernie Sanders. How could you say, well, Bernie Sanders had this guy do that? And you can't do that with Trump. And the problem in this country now is we have to blame somebody from a political party every time a nut carries out something because we're a blame culture now, and it's a joke.
But this guy actually is a Democrat, so whether it was over for maybe Democrats go bananas over lawn clipping. The other thing is that apparently Trump, who is a climate denier,
that's the best one, I think.
His own family were driven out of Europe by 19th century climate change.
There it is. Did Donald Trump's ancestors migrate to the United States because of a changing climate? Apparently, 130 years ago, Donald Trump's grandfather left Germany, just like Eddie Murphy in Coming to America, and went to Queens because he was trying to escape the climate change that was going on over there. And if you look at the weather in Queens and you compare it to where the Trumps lived in Germany, it's basically the same.
Yeah, and it was basically great because we were coming out of the Little Ice Age and we had this gradual warming trend through the 19th century. There were a lot of problems with in 19th century Germany. You got, your revolutions of 1848 and whatnot, but the weather wasn't one of them.
No, obviously not. And here's the thing. If you had a diary entry from Frederick Trump, who was Trump's grandfather, and he said we had to get out of here because things were going bad with the crops or whatever, then fine. Or if you did an interview with somebody. But there's no evidence whatsoever, again, to connect this back to Donald Trump. And the implication clearly is that the current president pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords, and now the planet is doomed, and he didn't realize that climate change actually affected his relatives 130 years ago. And boy, the irony of that, huh?
And the jokes on him, because the tortured climate, the slow warming trend of the 19th century that drove his grandfather to get on that ship to Ellis Island, he's now destroying the planet.
I think that's a perfect way to end this segment, and I got a thing I got to go anyway, but you just summed it up perfectly. I can't even add to that.
Okay, and there'll be a whole bunch of new nutty stories for which Donald Trump is to blame coming along. They're like the number 23 bus. There'll be another 3 by the next commercial break. Joe, thanks.
Thank you.
A federal judge has blocked President Trump's sanctuary city order. What's the president's next move? That's next on Tucker Carlson Tonight. Blocked the Trump administration from pursuing its crackdown on sanctuary cities that protect illegal immigrants from ICE. District Judge William H. Orrick, who's become practically a backup president at this point, says the administration's efforts to block recalcitrant cities from receiving federal grants is unconstitutional. Francisco Hernandez is an immigration attorney. Stephen Camarota is director of research at the Center for Immigration Studies, and they both join us. Francisco, who is this guy? Judge Orrick, a district court judge, to overturn the government of the United States.
He's the federal judge. That's his job. It's the 3 branches, the rocks, paper, scissors form of government that we have. He's a federal judge. They're vetted. There's nothing smelly about him. It's the law. Quite frankly, it's always been a funding issue with the jails. But look, we're still arguing about political phantom. There is no such thing as a sanctuary city. Everybody's just afraid of it. But why don't we move on and come up with a solution?
No, wait a minute. You've said there's no
It doesn't exist.
No, wait a minute. You've said there's no such thing as a sanctuary city.
It doesn't exist.
Kate Steinle's murder is about to go to the jury. What would you say?
Has nothing to do with the sanctuary city. Had nothing to do with Sanctuary City. The man who murdered, the murderer, was transferred from Los Angeles County Jail to San Francisco Jail. He didn't go to any Sanctuary City. He was transferred there with an immigration hold after 5 previous deportations. He was taken there and let go because he wasn't picked up within the 48 hours regulation that the immigration hold requires.
Well, if you don't call them sanctuary cities, then what do you call them?
It is a political phantom. A city, a state, a county cannot tell the government you can't come in and take somebody from our custody. It is impossible. It's the federal government's preemption clause. Okay. It cannot happen.
Okay, Stephen, you take that one. According to Francisco, it's a phantom, this idea that there were sanctuary cities.
A political phantom.
No, look, here's what basically happens. Someone beats their wife, they get arrested for drunk driving, they're in a jail. When their fingerprints are submitted, the Immigration Service says, hey, this person's in the United States, he's here illegally. We've deported him in the past, that sort of thing. They say to the local community, the local jail, please hold that person. We're going to come and pick him up within 48 hours. And the community says, no, as a matter of policy, we're releasing him right now. Or we're not even going to inform you when we're going to release you. Because remember, they have proceedings against them. What happened in the case of San Francisco and Kate Steinle is they purposely released them without informing ICE. And that's what a sanctuary city is, bottom line.
And Francisco, there are
ICE doesn't have to wait 48 hours. They can get them anytime they want.
Francisco, there are state judges who won't even allow federal immigration officials in their courtroom. They let the guy out the back of the courtroom.
Oh, there was one instance, and we don't even really know what happened. Look, you can't have the executive branch invading the judicial or the legislative branch. It's a change in culture if we're going to start doing that.
Wait a minute. They're not doing that. This is legal sophistry, Francisco. We've got cities and states who will not enforce U.S. law. So
they cannot contravene it. They cannot go against it. ICE can go pick up anybody they want. We do it every day with drug offenders. We do it every day with illegal deportations.
Stephen, these guys, as you said, they're spousal abusers, they're drunk drivers. These are things that are not, particularly in the current climate, that are not trivial. We're supposed to accept that every dreamer is a high school valedictorian who's just wrapping up his third tour of Afghanistan. That's the myth that Francisco and co have peddled. What's the rationale that these guys... What's the rationale for actually protecting criminals?
Yeah, bottom line is, look, the Obama administration, these are statistics from them, in 2014 and 2015, 17,000 times when a jurisdiction was asked to hold someone, they purposefully, as a matter of policy, released them before the 48 hours when ICE could get there. That's the policy of these places. Anybody who supports this is essentially someone who opposes the most basic level of immigration enforcement. And that's essentially what these jurisdictions do. For them, whenever an illegal alien is made to leave the country, even if he's beat his wife or is a drunk driver, that is a tragedy. And that's the outrage here. It's a kind of fundamental lawlessness. Now, I should point out to your listeners, the vast majority of jurisdictions don't do this. There's only about 200. And the ones that the Attorney General is trying to take money away from are the ones that the Obama administration said were so bad. So it's a continuation. This isn't something Trump has invented. This is the reality. They release thousands of people as a matter of policy who are illegal aliens in jails even after ICE asks them to hold. That's what's happening.
Look, that's just a plain lie. That is just such a deception. It's such a lie.
That's the truth.
They cannot. ICE can pick them up. It is impossible. We put federal holds on people every single day, and every city, every county, every state has to obey it by a matter of policy. That can. You telling me that by a matter of policy, a city can tell the federal government you can't come in and take somebody? That is an absolute lie.
Come on, now you're not being fair. What's happening here is that the jurisdiction is doing the things they do to drunk drivers or someone who beats their wife, or they decide, well, we don't have quite enough case against that person, and then they're supposed to tell ICE, okay, we're going to release this person, please let us know, and then ICE should go pick them up, and they purposely don't tell ICE.
Francisco, do you regard crimes? The mayor of New York has said he does not regard drunk driving by illegal aliens as a serious crime. Do you feel the same way?
Well, immigration law doesn't consider it as a serious crime worth in and of itself for removal. That's federal law. I don't care what the mayor says. I don't care if he's right or wrong. It's the federal immigration law.
No,
we're talking anything that's punishable more than 90 days is a serious crime.
Well, why is the mayor of New York boasting that drunk drivers should feel safe in his city?
Because we're using tragedies in these situations to advance political interests, and that's what's embarrassing for us. In fact, we're doing that right now on this show. Why don't we move on and agree on immigration reform? You and I can sit down and hammer out a proposal.
We don't agree on immigration reform, Francisco, because essentially you guys are open border guys for whom immigration reform is one of those sly euphemisms that's intended to pull the wool over people's eyes. But thanks for coming on, Francisco. Francisco, and thank you too,
so
Stephen.
much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
It's been close to
Appreciate
2
the time.
months since the Vegas shooting, but instead of answers, we're only getting conspiracy theories. We'll discuss the latest next. It's been nearly 2 months since Stephen Paddock committed the deadliest single-shooter massacre in U.S. history. Yet the hunt for answers in the Vegas shooting seems to have stalled. Survivors of the slaughter are getting frustrated.
I know that I'm not alone in feeling like we just need more answers. I know that the police or the FBI or whoever, they have a job to do, and I'm sure they don't want to leak a lot of information, but it's been 7 weeks.
Now, several new lawsuits have been filed against MGM, which owns the Mandalay Bay Hotel, as well as the concert organizers. Mo Aziz is representing more than 400 Las Vegas victims, and he joins us. Mo, you filed this lawsuit. What's the reason behind it?
Well, the main reason, sir, is to find out how this event happened and unfolded, and how the security breach was allowed to occur. There's several questions here. First of all being, how did Mr. Paddock get access to the freight elevator? How did he get 20 long guns up into this room? How did he get more than 5,000 rounds of ammunition? Why was his room not checked during the course of the time that he was able to barricade it, install security cameras, and then carry out this vicious attack?
Most of these questions would appear to be for MGM, who own the Mandalay Bay Hotel. Are they the main target in that? You feel they're not being forthcoming about what happened?
Sir, they're absolutely not being forthcoming. I mean, for example, the 911 call, there's still a discrepancy as to when law enforcement was notified that there was an active shooter on the premises. And they haven't released the call. We don't know how long the shooting was going on before the first call for help was made. I think that would go a long way for explaining to some of my clients as to how this event unfolded and then went on for almost 12 minutes or over 12 minutes. And so the MGM has to show to us what their policies and procedures were for an active shooter in this day and age.
Well, this is obviously a criminal case as well. Are you frustrated that the sheriff's department in Clark County hasn't actually got these answers out of the MGM chain?
So the sheriff's office may have the answers. I think they've got an open investigation and they've got certain policies and procedures that they're bound to follow. However, MGM is a private entity, and if they want to share some information with the public that would give some answers to these victims, I think they're free to do so. The Clark County Sheriff's Department has to follow certain protocols. So we don't have any issue with the Sheriff's Department or the work that they've done. Our issue is we need to know what MGM's plan was for an active shooter type of situation, and what their security plan is if somebody is bringing in multiple suitcases of materials and is putting surveillance cameras
and accessing the freight elevator. There was a judge.
Yes, sir.
There was a court order a couple of days ago in which MGM was ordered by a judge not to destroy evidence, including video evidence, the key card records which record when a guy goes into his hotel room and when he goes out and that kind of thing. Are you concerned that MGM may destroy evidence?
So now that we have the order in place, I'm not concerned that those particular items may be destroyed at this point. What I am concerned about is their communications as the event unfolded, number one. And what I'm really concerned about is that after 9/11, after other major terrorist events, these big hotels in the hospitality industry, they had to have discussions amongst themselves as to what could happen on their property, and especially after, even going all the way back to the Columbine shooting, the nature of the threat has changed. So I am concerned that those discussions, those emails, and those discussions with outside consultants and risk experts, those are where the heart of the case would lie, in proving what they should have done to prevent this type of event, or at least minimize the loss of life.
Well, stay on it, Mo. We'll be interested to see the response from MGM, because this case is getting curiouser and curiouser in the 7 or so weeks since it occurred. Mo Aziz, thank you very much. Before you head over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house this holiday season, you may want to hear a new warning about your relatives. It's coming from the Girl Scouts. We'll explain next on Tucker Carlson Tonight. The Girl Scouts have found a new threat to the well-being of girls, and it's not cookie-induced obesity. Instead, it's hugs. The organization is warning parents not to make their children hug or kiss family members over the holiday season. If they do, the Girl Scouts warn, they're training their daughters to be possible sexual harassment victims later in life. It's far safer, they say, to have the girls do a high five or a smile. Nell Daly is a psychotherapist. She joins us. Nell, I found this story just unutterably sad and depressing. There's a sense that family life is tainted, and even something as innocent as an excited little girl or little boy rushing up to hug a beloved uncle is now a potentially dangerous situation.
Well, I think what the Girl Scouts are saying is not that a child couldn't go up and hug a relative. They want the girl to make the decision as to whether or not they want to hug that relative, that a hug shouldn't be forced upon them, or, it's generally the case where parents will say, now give Uncle Johnny or Grandma Alice a hug goodbye, and what they're asking is parents to sort of rethink that conversation.
Well, that's generally because children are fairly awkward, and they feel slightly discombobulated by old people, so they don't want to necessarily hug their 87-year-old granny, but the 87-year-old granny might appreciate it. Is there a danger of actually making an issue of this?
I wouldn't say that the 87-year-old grandmother is the issue. What is the issue, and this is a sad fact, is that 1 in every 9 girls in the United States will be sexually assaulted or abused by the time she's 18. And 1 out of every 3 of those cases, the perpetrator is actually a family member. And so we live in a culture of denial, and that's changing now with so many women coming out about the fact that they've been sexually harassed in the workplace. So what I think the Girl Scouts are trying to do is open up the conversation as to how do we teach girls to have boundaries and families to have better boundaries around their girls.
Well, liberals are the great huggers. It's us up to...
Why conservatives don't hug? Republicans don't hug?
We're supposed to be uptight, and we don't. Liberals hug trees. Liberals hug... Queen Elizabeth was regarded as a cold, heartless mother for not hugging the Prince of Wales, which supposedly led to his divorce and all the rest of it. Are you worried that if we actually attempt to make even the most innocent physical contact something that has to be patrolled and policed, we risk doing to the general population what the Queen did to Prince Charles?
Oh, no, I'm not. Because we're just having a conversation here. And the conversation that follows then is exactly the question that you just asked. How do we cultivate healthy intimacy in families? How do we cultivate appropriate touching and affection? Affection's important. It's the way we thrive. It's part of the reasons we thrive as humans. Children especially need affection. If we don't give children affection in cribs, for example, in orphanages, they don't develop correctly. So no one's suggesting that.
But it used to be a universally safe gesture. I've sat in traffic behind Bernie Sanders voters going 28 miles an hour with "Arms are for hugging" bumper stickers. And it was a universally safe gesture. And now the Girl Scouts are saying arms aren't for hugging, arms are for bombing North Korea.
No, actually, they're not saying that. They're simply saying in these kinds of situations where relatives are coming into a home that maybe the parents don't know what the relatives are necessarily like, maybe they haven't seen Uncle Tom in 5 years, you don't necessarily have to force your child to hug that relative. They're just saying, let's let the girls have what I would call self-agency. If a child wants to hug that adult, they're free to if the adult wants to be hugged.
Okay, self-agency. Thank you. Now have a very self-agency Thanksgiving. President Trump got his first chance to take part in an annual tradition, the presidential turkey pardon. No self-agency for those turkeys. That's next on Tucker Carlson Tonight. President Trump performed the traditional presidential turkey pardon today, sparing drumstick and wishbone from an untimely but very tasty Thanksgiving demise.
And now I think drumstick and wishbone would be very thankful if we would just get around to the pardon. They say, enough talk, please pardon us. I feel so good about myself, Tony. Are you ready, drumstick? Okay. Drumstick, you are hereby pardoned.
Well, before he was pardoned, though, President Trump had some choice remarks about the fate of President Obama's 2016 turkeys, Tater and Tot. He said he checked to see if their pardons could be revoked, but his lawyers assured him that would be illegal. So Tater and Tot are safe, of course, even if they weren't. A judge in Hawaii or San Francisco would just save them anyway, take them to a sanctuary turkey farm. That's it for us. Tune in each night at 8 o'clock to the show that's the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness and groupthink. Also, don't forget to DVR the show. That's it from New York. I'm thankful for many things, including the fact that Sean Hannity is here for the full hour this pre-Thanksgiving night. Sean Hannity, go get him, Sean.